Hi, my name is Kevin T. Porter, and my favorite thing is Bruce Springsteen. He's a singer-songwriter, and he's kind of old now, but he has some good songs, and I like him a lot.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello, and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is a very special Valentine's Day edition of Finding Favorite. I don't know, every couple months that I've been doing this podcast, I make a big swing, make a big ask. And right before New Year's, I got very brave and I sent an email to Kevin T. Porter, who's the host of Good Christian Fun and Gilmore Guys, and I asked him if he would come on Finding Favorites. And he said yes. If you remember the mind map that I posted to Twitter that became the origin story of this podcast, Gilmore Guys is central to my finding like every podcast I listen to now. I listened to West Wing Weekly. The Gilmore Girls reboot was announced. And then I'd heard, there's this podcast where these two guys are rewatching the Gilmore Girls. You should listen to it. So I started listening to the Gilmore Guys. Through that, I was introduced to Jason Mantzoukas. I listened to a couple episodes of his. I found out about How Did This Get Made? I found out about Nicole Byer, about John Gabris, about the Doughboys. Gilmore Guys truly opened the door to like all of my podcast friends. And so when Kevin agreed to come on Finding Favorites and talk about something that wasn't Gilmore Girls or Christian pop culture or baking, I was so excited. And you will hear that in this interview, that I am nervous, I am keyed up, I am high on adrenaline. I was high on adrenaline for a solid 24 hours after this interview. So I literally shout at him, "Yeah, right. Oh my God, cool. Yeah, love it," approximately 8,000 times during this interview. And I tried to take out probably 70% of my random exclamations of adrenaline, but it's okay. We're all learning together. And I don't work in PR anymore, so I feel like it's okay to be excited about a guest. And Kevin is someone that I have a parasocial relationship with, which means it's a one-way relationship because I have listened to hundreds of hours of his podcasts and thousands of hours of other podcasts that I got to kind of through that door, that hobby door of listening to his podcast. And I was excited. And he was as nice, as kind, as interesting as I hoped he would be based on the time I've spent with him in my ears, especially during quarantine. So we talk about Bruce Springsteen. And during the edit of this, I went and found a bunch of YouTube clips of Bruce. So the show notes for this one are chock full of Bruce Springsteen clips. And I'm going to use a couple, instead of my normal music bumpers, I use a couple clips from different Bruce songs. Short enough clips that I don't get dinged by the copyright police. I hope. I hope wherever you are celebrating Valentine's Day or Palentine's Day with your pals or President's Day, that you continue to stay safe. So stay safe, stay home just a little bit longer, wear a mask, and wash your hands. And enjoy this conversation about Bruce Springsteen. Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we talk to people about their favorite things and we get recommendations without using an algorithm. To say I'm excited this week is an understatement, so we're going to jump into it. I am, in my interview with Jason Mathis, we talked about this mind map, this thing that I posted to Twitter. I was tracing the podcast I'd listened to and trying to understand the comedy I listened to today and the relationships I have with podcasts. And the first stop was West Wing Weekly.
The second stop was Gilmore Guys. And then from Gilmore Guys came literally everything else I put in my ears. And I am so excited to have on my podcast this evening Kevin T. Porter from Gilmore Guys, which became Bunhead Bros, which became Maisel Goys. Currently the host of Good Christian Fun and one of my COVID favorites, Inside Voices. Kevin T. Porter, welcome to Finding Favorites.
You.
How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. I love the qualifier of a COVID favorite. It may not be an all-time favorite, but it is a COVID favorite. Because I know what you're saying, because I have COVID favorites myself, where it's like, this is what I discovered during the old Demi, the old pandemic, and I will remember enjoying this thing during this 16 months or whatever it ends up being. Probably more than that. 18 months.
Well, I guess I the only reason it gets the qualifier of COVID favorite is I found it during. I mean, did you release? I know you recorded some episodes of Inside Voices before, but were any released before COVID?
Yes, we did. I think we started in January.
Okay.
Now I don't remember January 2020 because I'll always remember it because I went to New York and Washington D.C. specifically to record. Which sounds so dumb now. Like I went out of town to record a podcast because how else would you?
How else would you
record a podcast unless you
no
go to where the person is? So I remember recording the last few episodes of that season with those people, and I remember my last in-person guest for that, Glenn Weldon from NPR's Pop Culture Happy Hour. When we met, he elbow bumped me. It was March 5th, 6th.
Okay.
I was like, okay, weird. Like, why is he elbow bumping me? Who cares? And I remember defiantly shaking the engineer's hand, the woman who was running the board at the studio. I was like, I'm not going to elbow bump. You know, I love Glenn.
Right.
He's a friend of mine. But I was like, this is strange. And turns out, #Glenn knew. Glenn knew all along. And how dare I doubt him in that sense.
I listened to that episode just maybe 2 weeks ago, and you really apologize for the sound at the beginning. You're like, there's all this sound of a cafe, and the studio was not quiet. I mean, it really sounds like you guys are just sitting. Are you just in the middle of a restaurant?
No, but it certainly sounds like it. We were right next to a restaurant and a cafe. At I won't blow up the hotel name or anything like that, but it was like, it's a recording studio, so I assumed it was a recording studio. And truly what it is we have microphones set up and there's a glass enclosure. Is there soundproofing? No. Can you get split audio tracks? No, you cannot. Can you? It was just a lot of stuff where I'm like, well, all right, I mean, we might as well have just met at Glenn's bedroom, you know, like it was just a funny thing. But it was a thing listening back to it of, I'm not going to hear this sound again for a long time in terms of the ambiance of strangers enjoying themselves and dining. I mean, I'm personally not going to hear that for a long time.
No, it's going to be ages. And and you did a big setup to the episode, and I was like, surely it won't. And I wanted to replay it immediately because I miss sitting alone in a cafe or a bar and just having noise.
Isn't that funny? That may be it'll be interesting to see how this generational trauma works itself out. But, you know, if some of our ambient stuff that we listen to going to sleep now is like rainforest and stormy weather or like even the wind or something, maybe in 15 years it's going to be cafes, like crowded sports arenas. Like, that will be what is comforting to us as we experience those things again.
I think it will be. In grad school, I took a production class. And I forget what it's called, but there's a type of sound that you can buy that's chit chat. That's like room noise.
Okay.
That you buy to, like, if you shot some video and it's too quiet, or you're doing an audiobook and you need that ambiance, and it's got like a really cute name that I'm not gonna remember.
It's a cute name, but it's not a memorable name.
It's not a memorable name.
Say that.
And after I listened to that episode, I was like, maybe I just want to go and buy some audio of a coffee shop.
Might as well. I know. I do miss that sound so much.
Yeah.
Now the sound of a crowded place is scary to me.
It's so
it sounds
scary.
like a war zone or gunfires going off in the distance, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, what a great note to start the show. I mean, it's good though, because we're talking about what our favorite things are to listen to. I remember when I was a kid, I would listen to episodes of The West Wing, the aforementioned West Wing Weekly.
Yep.
Falling asleep. I ripped the DVDs that I owned and I made them MP3s and put them on my iPod and listened to those and would kind of internalize and memorize those episodes as I fell asleep as a 14-year-old boy.
I fell asleep to a lot of Loveline.
Loveline.
When Adam Carolla was still on it.
Okay.
So 90s, in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to, and I got to meet Dr. Drew once. He came to the college where I worked to do an event. And I took a picture of us, and then that was my Christmas card that year. Was me and Dr. Drew. But yeah, it was before, it was kind of before Dr. Drew super went off the deep end.
Yeah, he's far from the shallow now. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
He is what that song is about.
Then when I worked like a swing shift, I then would listen to Art Bell. Did you ever listen to Art Bell?
I don't know Art Bell.
Probably better that you don't. He does a lot of, he's passed now, but his show is a lot of conspiracies and like shadow people and very spooky things, which when it's like 3 a.m. and you can't sleep, it is not helpful to listen to an AM talk show about shadow people. Not good.
Man, he would have loved the past 3 years in this country, huh?
He would have been the king of it, I think.
This would have been his...
It was his time.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, sad he couldn't see this day come where QAnon ladies run Congress or whatever.
It's so awful.
Who's your favorite congressperson, listener? Write into the show, finding your favorite congressional conspiracy theorist. Let Leah know.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit before I hit record.
Mm-hmm.
So my COVID hobby is podcasting, and you started baking. And
yes,
so
I have.
How is that going?
Well, I had baked a little bit before COVID hit. Like the last couple of years, I would like to try out different cookie recipes. And I always stuck with really safe little staples like snickerdoodles or just like a regular peanut butter cookie. And then moving into this new place where I finally live alone and then just having free reign of the kitchen felt like such a luxury where it's like, I don't have to be considerate of anyone besides myself. And so I started experimenting a little bit before COVID started. And then it was a thing where it absolutely plummeted when it started because there was nowhere for the food to go. Yeah. And this was before we knew a lot about surfaces and how transmission really works. And so after understanding that data and getting that information, it felt like a nice excuse to see people or to give people something and to maintain a connection with them where it's like, I just left something on your doorstep and ran away. Contactless friendship is what I'm in the business of now. So that was kind of the aim and goal of that. And it became a nice little rhythm and ritual to get into every day of just getting up, exercising maybe a little bit, and then coming back home and baking in the morning and trying out new recipes and stuff. And then it ramped up eventually to I started a little teeny, itsy bitsy little bake shop here in Los Angeles where people can order online and I'll deliver it within Los Angeles County. It's a bad business model, even though we've had some success. We as me and my puppets here in this room. They're all my personal assistants, but it's been that's actually been a nice way when it hasn't like overloaded. There was one week where I got like 60 orders in 3 days. Oh, no. I was like, this isn't fun. That was not good. But now it's at the regular like maybe 7 to 12 orders in a week, and it's like, okay, this feels good to go out and like do 3 drop-offs in a day or something. But it's a nice way to see Los Angeles County because I would have no other reason otherwise. And to just get out of my car with a mask on, drop something on people's doorstep, ring the doorbell, run away, Yeah. But still like going to places in LA I haven't really made myself acquainted with. Places I didn't even know technically were in Los Angeles County. Places like Palos Verdes and La Mirada and places like that you definitely don't think of when you think of LA proper,
Right. Because I got a car during COVID. I haven't had a car in 18 years. I've been in Chicago for a long time. I'm like, I ride my bike. I take the bus. I take the train. And I was not willing to do that once COVID started. And so I finally got a car. And then I'm like, well, I guess I'll go to Culver's in the suburbs or I've gone to where I go for a drive-through is not in the city anymore. Just because I've got to go somewhere.
You have a destination.
I need
have
a destination
trip ahead of you. Yes.
Yeah.
I fully understand that. And it's all invented stuff now. You are inventing all of your structure in some ways outside of the actual physical and like work obligations. Everything else is just, I guess I'll make myself do this for fun and force myself to do this for no other reason than I'm forcing myself to do it. So yeah, I think the baking was a part of that invented structure. And it feels nice to have like a little bit of baking homework every day, even, you know, and it's fun. It's still fun to do. I'll stop when it's not fun anymore.
That's a good plan. There was a Christmas once when my mom, what were they called? Cabbage Patch Kids? Before, like the year before they got really big as manufactured, there was a pattern that people could buy and make their own.
Okay.
And they got really popular in my hometown, and my mom spent like one Christmas making those for other families. And that was where I kind of saw like, oh, if you do a home business around a product, like a homemade product, and you don't control it, it can just balloon so fast. So that sounds like your 60 cookie week, your 60 delivery week.
Yeah. Yeah, 60 orders. It was, I think it was upwards of 600 cookies. It was a lot. It was a lot. I mean,
too many
it's
cookies.
Like usually a dozen, sometimes a couple dozen. Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah.
It got to the point where it's like, do I hate cookies? But the answer is no. It's just that anything in a certain context, for even as much as you enjoy it, can become toil if you allow it. So that was a good example of that. But I'm getting my groove back. I'm experimenting with recipes again. But that was one of those things where it's like I've made the same 4 cookies so many times. And when I want to do something for fun with a little bit of free time, my instinct now isn't, well, what about a funfetti recipe? You know, but now I'm kind of getting back into that groove with it, fortunately.
Nice. The concept of my podcast is how did people find their favorite thing? And when we were talking about what the topic might be today, you do tend to make whole podcasts about your favorate thing, about things that are your favorites.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because I'm thinking back on like, are these my favorite things? I think I would even amend that just a little bit to say I do make shows about things that I think are the most interesting that I like. But I think both in the case of Gilmore Girls and the Christian pop culture stuff, it's stuff I have affection for that isn't necessarily my favorite, but I think it's interesting that I like it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's interesting that I so upset, like the context of me enjoying it for some reason is interesting to me. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's the least interesting thing in the world. But it's not like if I made a list of my top 10 shows of all time, Gilmore Girls would be number 1 with a bullet. But yes, it is a trend in this medium that happens a lot where people do that, where it's like, I love whatever. I love Dawson's Creek. That's my favorite show. I'm doing a Dawson's Creek rewatch podcast. I love football. I'm creating a football podcast where I talk about my favorite players, blah, blah, blah. And it does, just like I said about the baking stuff, anything can become toil in the right context. That definitely can become the case if you're not careful with how you interact with that content and that like that source material, that substance. And that's one reason where I'm like, where I have thought like, would it be fun to do a podcast about the thing we're going to talk about today? And I'm like, maybe not. Maybe that's my version of blasphemy, where it's like, no, well, you can't do that. That would be, that's just, I'm not enough of a scholar. And I feel like I might say something offensive. And I'm, you know, like I go in those spirals and rabbit holes.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I know that Inside Voices was whatever. Like, I do want to acknowledge the incredible parasocial imbalance, which is like, you have spent hundreds of hours in my apartment, in my ears.
Yes, which I've never been to, but now I see.
Yeah, I can see a little bit. And my cats are coming over to say hello. It's about
beautiful
that time
plants.
of night.
Love The Godfather up on the top shelf.
Thank you.
A terrific choice. Is that a VHS?
It is. It is.
Oh, I love it.
I think I still have a VCR in a box somewhere. I'm not sure.
Well, those are coming back after the physical media apocalypse rains down upon us and all the Apple servers go down. You're gonna want to keep on those VCRs.
The
and
few.
VHS
I have
tapes.
a few, yeah. But it did seem like Inside Voices was what I loved about how you manage those interviews. You understand podcasting at a level that I don't think a lot of people do. You didn't go into those interviews cold. You knew like a lot about their people's careers, and you were also a fan. But I thought that was a really interesting way that you took something that you had been doing professionally, or something that you'd been doing professionally for so many years, and turning it upside down as a conversation. And I really appreciated them.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. That's really nice to say. That it was such a natural overflow into something that I think a lot of people in this industry, and I think in other similar industries where people work alone or kind of in their little hobbit holes, kind of apart from people or not in a communal environment, where there is this sort of collective yearning for a break room conversation to go and make small talk or to gossip with someone while they're microwaving their Hot Pocket or something.
Yeah.
And that would happen so much before and after recording episodes of shows I was already doing. Is
right.
you would just talk whatever. You would just talk about some annoying thing that happened or some weird thing or some listener thing or like some gossip thing. And so it was fun to like, put it in a nice package where it became the text of the show. And it was mostly just an effort of like, we all work here, but none of us are talking to each other.
Yeah.
You know, even people on my network where it's like, I haven't really like sat down and just and had it out. Had it out.
Right.
Like I need to solve some conflict with them. But like, it was kind of it was out of a desire to do that. So hopefully we did that. We did that a little bit on that show.
Well, I'm hopeful that it comes back.
Yeah, me too. We'll see. We'll see if HeadGum wants it ever again. But I hope so. Maybe one day.
Because I also thought it was good as a new podcaster. There were times where just in the conversation, for example, in your interview with Rishi, when he talked about editing on paper, I was like, oh, that's how you pass off your audio to someone else. Him just describing how he edited West Wing Weekly, I was like, ooh, okay, I'm locking that away. For a future. So I also thought that was great for like the skills. There was some skills transfer in there that I really appreciated. I
know. And interviews with people like Rishi are where I'm learning because his skill set is so fundamentally probably better, but also so different from mine in the sense of the kind of shows that he makes.
Yeah.
Because there's such a necessity from the content he puts out that doesn't exist in almost everything that I do, where most of it is sit down and talk with some soundboard and some preparation and some long form interview stuff. But in terms of sound design and yes, the edit of that sort of stuff, and also just in general, the aesthetic of East Coast podcasting, like your Gimlets, your NPRs, is so different from West Coast comedy podcasting.
Yeah.
And I feel a little bit versed in the West Coast stuff, a little bit.
So we're not here to talk about podcasting. We're not here to talk about Amy Sherman Palladino or Christian pop culture. What are we here to talk about today?
We're here to talk about a singer-songwriter hailing from New Jersey, and his name is Bruce Frederick Springsteen.
I did not know that was his middle name.
That's his middle name, yes. Bruce Frederick. I believe he was named after his father or his grandfather. I forget.
Yeah.
Hailing from Monmouth County, born in Monmouth County Hospital, September 23rd, 1949. What a loser. This happened. I memorized the Wikipedia, but yeah, this is the case. It's in there for some reason. So yes, we're here to talk about this gentleman today.
All right, Bruce
Springsteen. Listeners may remember from his work with such companies as Jeep. A couple days ago as of recording this in the Super Bowl ad time.
I did when you said Bruce Springsteen, I was like, oh, I guess I got to watch that commercial now.
I know. That is, I have a lot of kind of weird thoughts about that commercial. It made me feel weird. It made me feel weird watching that.
It was
commercial in particular.
Real Christian.
It was real Christian, right?
When they're like in the middle and they just show a cross, I was like, oh, okay. All right. Because I saw the my like Jewish feeds. So I converted, and so I have like a very Jewish Twitter feed. And when that commercial came up, people were like, ooh, that's a weird one.
Yeah.
It's not just the cross once. They keep going back
it's a
to
couple
it.
of times, and it's a couple of different crosses. Well, especially because the commercial does take place, like the big centerpiece of it is him going to a tiny chapel in Kansas, which is purported to be the literal center of the country. And there's a cross over a silhouette of the continental United States that has an American flag on it, and then a cross over that, which is just truly looks like Christian nationalism in a way that's so... I felt very complicated about the whole thing on two levels, maybe three levels. One, he's never done a commercial before ever. He's never lent his music, his image to any commercial, anything ever. The most he's done is like political campaigns and then putting his song in trailers or, in trailers for movies he wrote a song for. So there's that where it's like, okay, first commercial, you're 71. It's for Jeep, which of course it's a car commercial. Two, the Christian nationalist imagery that is so subtle in a way that feels even worse upon reflection. And then three, the sort of the false dichotomy rhetoric of we need unity. We're so divided. We just need to listen to each other, like that sort of thing. And it's like your first commercial is a quasi white nationalist PSA for like, oh, we need to be nice to the people trying to kill us. It felt a little disappointing.
Yeah.
And that's why he's my favorite. I feel like I'm coming out so negative. But this is it. It's like watching a family member make bad decisions where I'm like, buddy, just call me. You could have run this by me. We could have had it out. I love you.
It felt like it belonged in Handmaid's Tale. Like when
I guess so,
when the government comes out of exile in Canada, like I was like, oh, that the reunited American or the reunited States with the star in the middle. I was just like, okay, so that's going in season 5 of The Handmaid's Tale.
I know it's so bleak.
Yeah,
I find this to be a common theme with all the Super Bowl commercials this year, where like this is the year we all finally felt, especially after this like brutal, traumatic year everyone's had.
Yeah,
where it's like, oh, growing up as a kid, if you were bored by football, the commercials were the fun part. Maybe something interesting or silly would happen. Maybe you would get the Budweiser frogs. Maybe you'd get What's Up. Maybe you'd get whatever. And now it's like, okay, Elmo and Grover are going to be shilling for the evil company DoorDash, which is, robbing drivers blind because of Prop 22 passing in the state of California. So stuff like that. And then, yes, like...
And that it was Daveed Diggs, who is like a pretty... Like when you think of the things he's done outside of Hamilton, they're very like... I think of him as being someone that would be on the side of labor and of the people. And so for him to be doing DoorDash,
same with
Sesame
Bruce.
Street, which is now an HBO.
Yes. No, it feels dystopian. This is the year that we've realized like all the people that we admired for so long also are very at fault in their own ways for not being a certain kind of progressive, where it's like, yeah, Bruce was like singing pro-union songs and working with local labor unions in 1981. He was a veterans activist in 1984. He was singing about police brutality in 1999. And in 2021, he's saying, you know what? Everyone needs to be nice to each other. It just feels odd. It feels odd.
It was weird.
To me. Yes.
But let's time travel a little bit.
Oh, let's go back in the past.
Go back.
Please. Yes.
Tell me about the first time you can remember loving Bruce Springsteen? Did you buy a first CD? Was there a music video that caught you off guard? Was he in the air you breathed growing up? Like, was everybody listening to Bruce, so there's not like a moment?
I think because of the generational gap, people assumed that my parents would have gotten me into it. But my first memory of it, I found out later that my dad was super into him.
Yeah.
And he just never shared it with me. And it came like 5 or 6 years into me being a huge fan and listener and goer of his concerts before my dad was like, yeah, I love him. And I'm like, what? You don't verbally communicate, Papa. Come on. But my first memory of it, I'll remember this forever. This is my version of love at first sight. And I'll remember it forever. I was in our home in Kingwood, Texas, a suburbs a little bit north of Houston, in Texas. And there was a huge cross on the wall. I'm just kidding. But I remember it must have been, I believe it was the year 2000. And there was a telethon playing on PBS. And it was like a pledge drive thing. And in between the segments where the people said, like, send in your money to PBS, we need it. They were playing excerpts from Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band live in New York City. So it must have been 2001 because it was in 2000 that concert occurred. So it was in 2001 and they played a song from it and the song was Out in the Street. And I remember watching it. And for the first time, I didn't know that I didn't know what this band was called. I didn't know what this song was. I didn't know who Bruce Springsteen was. I was just experiencing the visual with the audio of this band with this, with this kind of average but very handsome looking Italian Irish man, this redheaded woman, this insanely happy looking African American saxophone player, this drummer that looked like somebody's accountant. Oh, I think I must have known because of Conan O'Brien because it was Max Weinberg, and then a side guitar guy that looked like a pirate, like a mobster pirate, which is of course Steven Van Zandt. And I remember being so taken in a way where it's like it was almost it wasn't sexual, but it was something where it's like a feeling that you didn't have words for, but you had this innate attraction and draw to this energy. And I really remember Patty in that song for some reason, like her playing, and the kind of contagious, infectious joy of that. And I remember watching that video. And then loving it, and then never thinking or listening to Bruce Springsteen for 4 years. And so that was 2001, and then I didn't start listening to him until 2005. That's how I got into him, is because I got an iPod, a 60 gigabyte iPod, with one of the white ones with the click wheel.
I believe, were only white the first year. Like, I don't think there were colors, were there?
Well, they were only white the first year, and then they started out rolling different kinds of colors in Gen 4 of it, because then you could get the metallic, like the steel. You could get a black iPod. You could get the black and red U2 iPod with all of U2's music loaded up on it. And I got this iPod, and at the time, my taste was only, I love movie soundtracks. I love score in songs, like pop songs from movie soundtracks.
Yep.
I was coming out of, I guess, listening to Christian music, but it was at the point where it's like, this is getting less and less relevant. I'm more into movie scores. But then there was just, 58 free gigabytes on the iPod. So I was like, okay, well, what is music? And I remember just Googling like top albums, and I got to Rolling Stone's list of the top 500 songs of all time, which is a list put together by this boomer generation of like straight white guys that all probably look like me. It's very tragic. It's like number one, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely. What was the number one song? I think at the time was Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan. And
it would have been like Beatles, literally Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen.
Yes. So I remember, I believe Born to Run in that incarnation of the top 500 songs was number 14. And so I downloaded it. I think from some Russian MP3 website where it's like you paid for it, but you paid in Russian money. So it was like 10 cents a song or something like that. I remember listening to that and I was like kind of into it. And then 2005 is when his album Devils and Dust came out. So I listened to that. And that was just like a solo acoustic record, like not typical, more of like a side project feeling from him, not E Street Band stuff. But then I remember listening to the song, the opening track on Born to Run, Thunder Road, on the way to a theater rehearsal in the year 2005, and listening to that song on the way to the school. And I was like, what is this song? What is this music? And that was a love at first listen again. And it was almost, it wasn't like, Math Lady meme where I was like piecing it all together, like the song from my childhood, but it was like that slowly coalesced and snowballed into loving Bruce.
Right.
But it was like a slow burn in a way. Although I do remember too, because I know we're talking about like the maps of how we get into favorites. I was really into Bob Dylan before I was really into Bruce Springsteen. So I guess when I was getting into that Rolling Stone list, I got legitimately into Dylan, watched the documentaries, read the books, got, all those first albums on compact disc and listened to those. And I really, really liked it. But I didn't love it on a bone level, but I was just like I super enjoyed it. It's like a movie I'd love to watch, but it wasn't my favorite of all time. But it was the exact right bridge to get me to Bruce. Yes, because I feel like maybe someone even wrote this as criticism about Bruce, but it's like if Dylan was for your mind and Elvis was for your body, Bruce combined those things to be for both. And so there was like no intellectual or visceral compromise in the sense of experiencing his music, which I really appreciate about it. So there was like a little Dylan-esque poetry, but it did not come at the cost of any excitement and any like instinctual bone deep fun that you would have with something like Elvis.
Wow. It's such a different, so I'm 44. So I grew up on radio and CDs, but I had one of my earlier interviews there was on Sunday nights in Terre Haute, Indiana, there was Alternative Sunday, and it was the alternative music show. And for 6 hours, once a week, we got alternative music. That was how I learned that They Might Be Giants and Weird Al are not alternative music. And like got into Jane's Addiction is like burned in my brain as the first alternative CD I bought on my own, and then buying a ton of CDs, but also just like recording hours of the show onto tapes and listening to that. And then somehow I just kind of missed Napster because I didn't have a computer or an iPod in the time when that first wave of digital downloads.
Yes.
But I also had a big soundtrack, movie score, jazz. Like I had a lot of years where that's what I listened to, because a soundtrack gets you it's such an economical way to get a variety of music. Mm-hmm. If the director is good at picking music.
Yeah, it was like Quentin Tarantino made me a mixtape, and it's called Jackie Brown from 1997. It was great for before Spotify playlist, like a personal curation of sorts.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about, seeing him. You saw him on TV, but your reaction wasn't, Mom, Dad, can we make a donation and get this VHS? Like, can we get the DVD that they're trying to woo more donations with Bruce? Mm-hmm. That it just lodged in there and was waiting to be rehydrated when you found it.
I find that so interesting that I just like, I remember so little about my childhood, and I guess I was 11 or 12 at the time that I watched it, but I'll just remember it forever because of the feeling that it created. It feels like, I don't know, and I don't get woo-woo with religious stuff or anything else, but it did feel as close to cosmic or destined as I've ever felt in the sense of enjoying something where I'm like, I'm not in control of this. I feel like something is choosing me in this moment. And that's a very strange and humbling thing to feel, I think.
Yeah. That's amazing. So then you hear through the Rolling Stones list, you get to Born to Run.
Yeah.
Which is probably like a more traditional way in.
Oh, yeah. It's not Bruce, like, hey,
right?
Mom, I listen to Devils and Dust. I love Bruce now. Yeah. It's usually like, it's because Born to Run is one of his biggest hits, obviously. but it was still it was a slow burn because what was that? That was 2005. And then 2006, I mean, I could literally go year by year. So much of high school and college is just marked of what was Bruce doing then? And that's how I mark time.
Yeah.
And he's just been with me since I've been 14 years old, But the next year he put out the Seeger Sessions Band record, which is not any of his original music. It was a bunch of covers of folk songs with a huge folk band that he put together of 2 fiddle players, a banjo player, 5 horn players, and it was all very interesting Americana, bluegrass, country, western, sometimes Cajun, sometimes swing, sometimes gospel music.
Yeah.
And those concerts are the best he's ever done in the 21st century. I still feel that way. But that was first, I didn't get to go. I did not get to go to those concerts. But that's why they kind of retain mythic status in my head. Because it's I didn't get to see the Sessions Band. But those, live in Dublin, that was a live release that meant a lot to me. And then my first concert I saw was when him and the band, the E Street Band, toured together.
Yeah.
For the Magic tour for that album in 2007, I flew out to Philadelphia in October 5th, 2007 was my first concert that I saw of him. And that was one of the last ones ever featuring the entire E Street Band before their organ player, Danny Federici, passed away the following year. So it's I got to see the whole band before Clarence passed away, before Danny passed away.
Yeah.
And I got to see in the flesh in Philadelphia on the East Coast. It was, such a privilege to see.
How did you end up choosing Philadelphia as the place to go?
My dad lived in New Jersey at the time. And so it was go see Dad. And Philly's not that far. It was just a little drive. It was an hour and a half or 2 hour drive. So that was kind of the rationale behind that. Because then my dad was also living still in New Jersey when I saw him at Giant Stadium 3 times the following summer. Most of my high school and college years, I just remember being so marked by, Bruce was on tour here, and I saw him here, and then I went to Tulsa, and then I went to Dallas, and then I took my 3 friends to Houston, and then we saw him on the front row for that show, and then that bonded us together for life, and stuff like that, where it's now there are relationships, I promise you, that I have maintained from high school, not solely, but primarily because we saw shows together when we were kids, when we were 16 and 17 years old. Those would be Kelsey, Grant, Katie, Corey, Rachel, friends of mine where it's that was we're bonded for the rest of our lives. It's we had sex, it's we experienced an intimate physical thing, and now we're just going to have this knowledge together for each other. And then, it is not now, but hopefully in the future, again, it's a opportunity and an excuse to reunite. Bruce is on tour. Are you flying out to California? Am I going back to Texas? Where are we seeing him?
Yeah.
So that social excuse was very meaningful in that way too.
Was that crew were those road trips to see shows more, or
sometimes? Most of them were local. Most of them were Dallas, Austin, Houston. But we have taken road trips to Washington, D.C. or where else have we taken road trips? Arizona. We took a road trip from Los Angeles to see him in Phoenix or just outside of Tempe. I think maybe Tempe, Arizona. And so some of them were road trips, but a lot of them were just local events, which now I'm grateful for twofold for because I've seen him, I think 24 times, 25 times.
Yeah.
From 2007 to the last time I saw him was 2016. And I feel it. It's been the longest stretch I've gone without seeing him in concert. And I feel it. Isn't that so weird? And with the world we live in now, it's I'm so grateful I had that time. And then too, it's just being a young man and being a kid, essentially. It's I don't want to travel to see him 18 times in a year when I'm 55. You know what I mean? I don't want to do that, because there's men and women who do that at those shows, and you probably don't want to be friends with them. But I want to take close friends of mine and baptize them in those live shows when we go together. Because that's what happened the last time I saw him here in Los Angeles. By luck of the lottery and luck of friendship, we were on the front row, myself, Eric, and Chelsea. And it's like, I'm going to know and love these people for the rest of my life. I was going to already, but that just like cemented it in a different kind of way.
Was that like a Hollywood Bowl show? Like, what was the LA show that you went to?
The LA show was it the sports arena? I believe it was the sports arena before they tore it down. There's a sports arena that's just called the Los Angeles Sports Arena. It wasn't like the Staples Center. And that's why they tore it down, because there's no sponsorship, I guess. And it was just outside of USC. It's not a Hollywood Bowl show. He's done Staples before. It wasn't Staples. I believe it was sports arena.
And when you're getting a front row ticket, because I do have a couple friends, former coworkers who are also like really into Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
Is getting on the front row, is that like, are you fighting your way to the front row, or this is just like the clouds parted and you clicked fast enough and you got front row tickets?
Well, it's a mixture. It's sort of clouds parting in a way, because you get a general admission ticket. And there's a pit, and then there's the rest of the floor. There's no seats on the floor. It's just like the arena seating, and then it's just a huge floor and the little divider where the front of that divider is the pit right in front of the stage.
Okay.
And if you're in the front row, there's no divider between where you are and the stage. If you're on the front row, your arms are on the stage.
Ooh.
There's like, he likes it where there's no security, like in between you, no barricade. And so you get a general admission ticket. You show up to the arena that afternoon between the hours of usually 2 and 5 p.m. here in America, at least. And you get a wristband with a number on it. And then all those numbers go in a huge bucket. And then they pick a number. And so if they gave out like 800 wristbands and they pick 642, whoever has the wristband 642 gets to be in the front of the show. And then 643 is the next one, and 644. So the idea of that, it's like it's random, and then everyone has an equal chance to get in. And it's just been kismet and luck. And especially that last time too, Leah, because we were like 786, 87, and 88.
Yeah.
And they chose 789. And so we were just cut off. And I was like, it felt so bad. It felt like someone shot me. But then it was this guy, Nigel, who we were talking to before the show and before they called and drew any numbers.
Yeah.
And we were just nice friends talking about our favorite musician. And when he went in, he was like, hey, those guys are with us. Can they come in too? And the security guy was like, yeah. And so we got to be on the front row because Nigel was such a nice man to us.
Oh.
I know.
Thank you,
that
Nigel.
So sweet? I know. And that's been, like there's gross people at these shows, and people where it's like, I wish you went to therapy or loved your family at all. Who like, I've seen him 104 times this year, and it's like, there's sad stuff. But then there's a lot of people like Nigel. There's a lot of people like the woman I met in Giant Stadium in 2008 who said, my cousin can't come to the show. Do you want her ticket? I'm not going to sell it to you. I'm going to give it to you for free. And, people like that, and people you see like years apart. Like I saw that lady at a Los Angeles show in 2012 years later. And yeah, that sort of community feeling, I do miss about just like concert going in general now, and not having any opportunity for that.
I got super into Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hamilton for me was the moment where I was like, you know what? I'm going to lean into being a fan, and it's okay. And it's okay to like just love something and travel and experience it. Where before there were, an ironic detachment or a Gen X cynicism of holding yourself a little bit arm's length. And Hamilton was the first time where I was like, fuck it, I'm going all in. And, like I'm single and I have a nice salary. So I got to see the original cast. And then a friend of mine and I got up the day that the tickets went on sale for the London cast. We got up at like 5 a.m. in Chicago and bought tickets. And we went with high school friends. A bunch of us went to London to see it. The year the Cubs were in the World Series, a lot of people didn't want their Hamilton tickets that week. So I like went and sat in the 5th row because baseball took over Chicago. So it meant I could get more Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little... And then I have also like traveled to see How Did This Get Made live shows.
Oh, yeah, it's very nice.
And I used to feel a little sheepish about that, about like traveling to see something. And now in COVID, I am so grateful.
Isn't that so funny?
Yeah.
Where it's like, yes, on some level, someone could say, but that's you know what? I feel like that's the outside looking in on anything. Because someone could say that about a Hamill fan. Someone could say that about a guy who goes to like a million Dodgers games in the same season. Like whatever the thing is that you don't personally connect to, it's so easy to be dismissive of. But understanding, especially now, the necessity of joy in people's lives and whatever the communal collective feeling, because I'm sure for you it wasn't just like, I want to watch Hamilton. Me, it was like, I want to be in a crowd where people are like really enjoying this show. I get to see this cast and like the thrill of the hunt too, like getting up with your friend early in the morning.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing.
It's truly like the rush of getting a general admission ticket for Bruce. Man, it makes me choke up even just thinking about it. Or like scoring one for my friend in Los Angeles and like getting to call her and told her I got it. You know, it's just it's a sort of adventure to be had in terms of like hunting for that stuff. And yes, and I think the connective tissue with Hamilton and Bruce stuff is that both of those things are almost painfully sincere, and it's so easy for people to dismiss them as corny, which is like not even like an unfair criticism, right? Like that, Bruce Springsteen is okay, it's just cars in America and a girl and driving on the road, and Hamilton is just like Lynn biting his lip on Twitter, you know, like whatever the corny, you know, thing that people put on Hamilton now. But then there's something really humbling about, you know, especially trying to be an educated adult in the world, to enter into this place of humility, to receive sincerity without apologizing for it, and just be like, yeah, okay, it's corny. Yeah, I know it's overly sincere. I know it's earnest, but this is meaningful to me. I connect with this thing. Yeah. And I can be self-aware about that and still be in a position to receive that in the fullness of its enjoyment.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing that replaces the crackling static electricity, the feeling before the lights go up or the first note.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's so powerful.
I know. Gosh, I know. And all those things are so much sweeter right now because they are purely memories or flights of imagination to be able to consider right now. Yeah. And it is, man, I can't wait to see like the long tail of what happens with live stuff. Like in 2029 or whatever, if people are just like, everything's sold out forever because we all were cooped up like dogs in a kennel for 2.5 years or whatever it ends up being.
It's sold out forever. And when do we get to like also sit close? When are we going to be allowed to even sit close to each other again?
Yes, and encounter strangers, like go to a movie. And I know with the Bruce stuff, because he was supposed to go on tour last year with his new album, and he wasn't able to, and they got to play SNL, and I'm like, listen, this isn't Maroon 5 or the 1975. He is 71. We need to get him on tour quickly. And he's like in excellent shape, obviously, but it's like, he's not going out on tour 30 years from now. This is the last stretch of this.
Going back a little bit, you said that you had been really into Bruce for 4 years before your dad said, "Oh no, I liked him too." Mm-hmm. Was that when you were adding? Like, did your dad tell you he liked Bruce when you were like adding Bruce Springsteen to your visits to him, or was it like even after that?
It was after that. It was, I think my mom told me in 2009 or 10, like, actually, Dad listened to Born to Run a lot in college. I was like, he did? He could have told me. This is this is such a father-son alley-oop for a generation of men who don't know how to emotionally communicate. Just say, I'm into that thing you're into as well.
Yeah.
It was right there. But yes, no, it took a little bit. And now we talk about it, thankfully. So we got over that hump. But... And there'd be cute things. Like I remember in 2009, he was at a Giant Stadium show I wasn't at, and he would like text me the songs that they were playing as they were playing them, and that was fun. And but yeah, and it was one of those things when I would go to the shows, because I, as like a 16, 17, 18-year-old boy, was an outlier in that crowd that did skew more towards the boomer generation, obviously. And people would say, like, did your dad get you into him, or was it your mom? And it's like, it was me. I'm here because of me. So it was always a sort of preconception to dismantle on the part of that.
Do you have a definitive Kevin's favorite albums, or like, do you like listen to it all together on shuffle, or do you have albums for different moods?
Well, in truth, I feel like Bruce is one of the only artists I've ever experienced where I feel like I could talk about the entirety of their catalog with some authority at all. The way I hear most music critics or music writers, or even just like amateur music fans on Twitter or on YouTube talk about their favorite artists, like, well, in 1994, Tom York and Radiohead was going through this, and that's why the production sounds like that. Like the way people talk about that, about multiple artists and people and singers. That's the way I can talk and see and experience Bruce, where it's like, I have a lay of the land of like, for example, if you named a song, I could play it on piano. Just like any song he's ever written, I could play it from like ear and memory on piano. I have an opinion on every song he's put out, like, which is just not true at all about any other artist that I've ever experienced. Even like artists I love, like, I don't know, Arcade Fire, Jenny Lewis, frickin', I don't know, Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. Like, I don't have like, well, in the third album, this actually kind of, but I do with Bruce. I see all of it. I could do like the definitive, here's the 349 songs ranked if I needed to. It would change every day. But yeah, so I do have preferences, and I do have, this is the mood. But you know what's funny too, Leah, is that I so often listen to the album cuts of his stuff. He's such a live performer, and often, and especially in like more in the last half of his career, the album stuff was like, okay, here's kind of what we're going to do live. It was like a blueprint, almost like a demo for what it's going to sound like live. And it always sounded better live. And there's a few exceptions to that, but it's like, there's not there. It's rare that I prefer an album version of whatever the best live version is to the song, where it's like, yeah, Incident on 57th Street, on some day, that's my favorite song. But on the album, the drums sound like crap. It's not the full E Street Band. The piano sounds too tinkly. But I love the Staples Center 1999 version on the reunion tour. I love the 1980 version from Nassau on the River tour. You know, like it's like to that degree. And it's only artists that I'm like this, that I have opinions about details with. I don't about anyone else. It's like, I like this Billy Joel song. I like this song by the Shirelles or the Supremes. Like, it's not like, whoa, this producer did this and I have this. Yeah, it's just not like that for me. And I do wish I had more of a vocabulary and perspective with other artists like I do with Bruce. But the nice thing about Bruce's music, in terms of like talking about like mapping the favorite stuff, is that it is such a center of American music, and that you go into like 7 different like branches of other things. So it's like, okay, he does covers of 6 3 4 5 7 8 9, which is his old Motown song. Okay, let's get into Motown. What other Motown songs was he covering? Okay, who's the original artist who did that Motown song? Okay, what's their weird B-side? Oh, I didn't give into the Stack stuff. Oh, he loves Sam Moore. Or then like on the totally other side of that, okay, Pete Seeger covers. Okay, what was Pete Seeger's whole deal? Let's get into folk music. Let's get into the bluegrass stuff in like the early 1960s. And then that gets you into Bob Dylan and the Woody Guthrie stuff. So it's like it branches out from him to all different sorts of American music.
And have you let him be your GPS to all sorts of American music?
Yeah. I mean, and it is limited. It's not like I got into techno funk reggae because of, you know, like there's you hit ceilings with it. But yeah, especially as a kid, where it's like you accept recommendations from friends more than you do like, because it really was just like the Rolling Stone Top 500. But like, yeah, that was such a cool way, I think, to experience music where it felt alive and personal, and I had some sort of frame of reference of this person feels this way about it, or even presented this song in this context, and that helps me understand this moment. And like Roy Orbison's career, because he
Right.
he was obsessed with Roy Orbison. He name checks him in Thunder Road. He does the PBS concert with Roy Orbison in 1988, alongside like Elvis Costello and Jackson Browne and Bonnie Raitt and all those guys on PBS. And then and here's a fun little aside that has nothing to do with anything. My grandfather spanked Roy Orbison. That's my claim to fame, because Roy Orbison was a small boy in my grandfather's elementary school class that he taught.
Okay.
And to discipline him back in the day where you could just
Sure.
hit children, he spanked him. And also Roy Orbison used to babysit my mother, because then he grew up and he was like little Roy, and then my grandfather asked little Roy to watch little Laura, and he did a couple of times growing up in Texas. So I'm connected to
wild.
Bruce in this way, is what I'm saying.
You've got your 6 degrees.
I do have
For
a
when
6
you meet
degrees,
him?
yes.
This is just like my ignorance of Bruce Springsteen, but is there, so Fish and Grateful Dead have taping cultures.
Yes.
Does
Bruce big time.
Okay, because you're
Yes.
rattling off live shows, and I don't know if they're official recordings or is there like a fan community of taped live shows? Are they bootleg? Are they legit?
Well, the answer is both, because he was such a persnickety little control freak until honestly the last 10 or 15 years of his live output. He was the most prolific, most acclaimed live artist of his generation at one point, and he had like 2 or 3 live albums to his name, and some of them were pretty crappily done.
Yeah.
And it was like such an outrage, because it's like all we had were these like bootleg recordings, and some of them sounded really good, but they were these little bootlegs, or they were like audience tapes, or they were, if he did a radio broadcast show, someone taped the radio broadcast and it got circulated for a long time. And it wasn't until 2014 they started releasing them officially on the website, and I've bought almost every one they've put out. Again, I don't do this with any other artist, and I don't even think it's interesting. Like when people say, well, Fish did this cover at this show, I'm like, who cares? But if Bruce did, I'm like, yeah. So it's like so ignorant to, again, if you're on the outside of it, who cares? But unless it affects you personally. But yes, there was a big taping culture, which thankfully the official management has kind of squashed by putting out really good official recordings of, like, on the 2014 and 2016 tours. They started putting out like every show, and those were kind of crummily mixed. They sounded okay. Some of them sounded better than others. There was like really bad quality control. And then they started putting out like the archival stuff, like, okay, here's this show from 1978. You've been wanting to be a live recording for 30 years of your life. These people who have like these kind of busted copy of a copy shows, or like, here's a show from 2006 that no one even cares to have. And it sounds incredible. Here's the Jazz Fest show in New Orleans right after Hurricane Katrina that he played. Here's the, the final tour show of the reunion night in 2000 at the Madison Square Garden at the end of a 10-night run. And it's like, it feels like such an embarrassment of riches to have these now, because I grew up at like that little sliver where it's like it was easy to download the bootlegs through sites like backstreets.com.
Yeah.
But it didn't sound great. And now it's like, oh, I can just pay for it. Oh, awesome.
That's
like
great.
And it's so funny that they held on to it for so long from releasing them officially, because he was just so uptight and control freaky about it, which I think he got to the point where he's like, I'm 65, let's put it out, baby.
Yeah.
Like, let's not hold on to it for the posthumous estate.
Do you have any, so I interviewed a friend of mine who's a huge fan of the Avett Brothers, and she talked about having, I think she called them chaser songs.
Chaser songs.
I think I'll re-listen and I'll be like,
can I guess what the definition
what I'm
is
trying
of
to
it?
say? Yeah.
Is it a song that you hope to hear at every live show that you go to? And
It's a song that you've never heard live that you're chasing to hear it.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yes, a song that I've never heard live that then you hope to hear at a show and you've never heard it. Yes.
Yeah.
Do I have a chaser song? Yeah, I got.
Do you have
like 20.
some of those?
Open All Night Sessions band arrangement. I've never heard with the E Street Band. I would have loved to have heard that with the E Street Band. There's like a few covers I really wish I would have heard that he only did once or twice. That would be super hard to hear.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the Sessions band tour was like chaser songs that he'll never play again. And then New York City Serenade. That was a big chaser song. the last song on his Wild at the Innocent, the Street Shuffle album. That would have been awesome to hear. But then so many of the others I have ended up hearing. Like,
you've heard?
Backstreets was a Chaser song. Incident was a Chaser song. Jungle Land was a Chaser song. And now I got some from like the new album where I'm like, I want to hear this live before you die, Mr. Springsteen.
Right.
I want to hear Janie Needs a Shooter. I want to hear Power of Prayer. I want to hear even from like the 2010 Darkness B-sides record, One Way Street and The Promise. I would love to hear those. Yeah, I got a bunch of those. That's a good term for that. Good on your friend for coining that.
I hope. Well, it's what it's called now.
Yeah, it's it. And if you look up on Urban Dictionary, it's cited, and the citation is this podcast.
Yeah. It was my goal.
Yeah.
My goal was to get it one Urban Dictionary definition.
Just one, only one.
Just one.
Yeah.
And one that's doesn't get you canceled. It's
yes, nice. You don't want a cancelable. Yeah, Chaser.
Yeah.
I think it's a very safe, uncancelable term. I think you're good.
What have been your recent songs on for baking? Getting a big order together. Like, what are the Bruce songs you might put on for that? Or are there any? Is he not a baking musician?
Hey, listen, he's got a song for every occasion. I listen to a lot of podcasts while baking. It kind of chills me out because baking can be kind of lonely too, in the sense of most of us are on our computers or screens all day, and you can always just like text someone on your iMessage. But when you're baking, your hands are so dirty, you can't text people, or like you have to like wash them off and then text and then go back to what you're doing. So I listen to a lot of podcasts where I'm like listening to people's voices. But the baking songs I've listened to with Bruce, I'll often put on like a show from 1978 or 1980 and just let it play through. And those are nice to feel that. And just to hear the sounds of crowds again.
Yeah.
There's an official live show they put out from Wembley Stadium from November 2006 with the Sessions Band. I've been listening to that a lot, like on runs and baking recently. So I'm trying to think of a specific song. I guess Blinded by the Light. Sessions Band arrangement, and Power of Prayer. Weirdly enough, Power of Prayer from Letter to You, his new album. Those have been getting a lot of rotation.
I am just podcasts all the time right now.
I get it. Yeah, I think podcasts have supplanted a lot of my music listening for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a part of living alone. Mm-hmm. I like the podcasts that feel like there's just some people sitting in my dining room. The podcasts that feel like company, just outside of reach. That's what I'm listening to all the time right now.
Yeah, something that like simulates a conversation, basically. Yeah, I love that too. I know. Although recently I started listening to my friend. I shouldn't say friend. My acquaintance. We follow each other, and she was on my podcast one time. Jamie Loftus has a podcast about Lolita that's super interesting and like such an interesting journalistic cultural examination of Lolita in the sense of...
Was she just on Andy Richter's podcast?
I don't think so, but maybe she was.
I have heard her on something. I have heard her being interviewed about it, and it sounds fast. Like it's a limited series podcast, right?
Yeah, it's like 10 or 12 episodes. I'm on episode 5 or 6 now, and very fascinating. Like intense journalistic work that she did. This just writer and comedian. So much research she did for this like really sensitive, because it touches on so many like triggering things like rape culture, pedophilia, and like, men, being abusive in positions of power. But she's like so funny and handles it so well and so delicately. So I've been listening to that a lot.
Nice.
Yeah.
As we move towards wrapping up, like what is a Bruce story that if we close this and you didn't tell it, you'd be like, I can't believe all my Bruce heads are going to be so mad at me because I didn't explain this thing about Bruce. Is there anything? Obviously, you could talk about Bruce. You could give a PhD level class about him.
There's so many things I haven't said too. I think the thing I would want to impart and communicate is that for every season, there is a Bruce. For every reason, Bruce. Because growing up, I thought like, oh, he's the big, bulky, muscled up Rambo looking guy who shouts about America, right?
Right.
It's like, that is a part of it. Like Born in the USA, which is like a song about our country screwing over veterans is a part of it. But there's also like the sort of gypsy motorcycle riding 1975 Bruce. There's like the lean sort of James Dean in a noir movie, like very terse poetry Bruce. There's the Flannery O'Connor obsessed Bruce from Nebraska. There's the American Prophet Bruce from Ghost of Tom Joad and Devils and Dust. That thing that sings mostly about immigrants and about, border issues. There's the fun party guy. I don't know. Like I think it's just always going to feel a little bit lame, and he's always been sort of a dad even before he was literally a dad. But I think that's what I love about him too, is like the unreserved, flagrant goofiness of some of his stuff was so cool to me. And the thing that so much of rock music is obsessed with in particular is making things look easy. Like if you see a Rolling Stones show with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, the whole point, and with so many of these bands, even now, is like a lack of effort. Like, this is easy for us. We're so good. We make this look good. There's a cigarette hanging out the side of my mouth. And it's like, we just showed up and maybe we're drunk or high or whatever. And he treats it like a job. He treats like doing a live show for 3.5 hours to entertain a crowd of 60,000 people as if he's a lawyer preparing for the O.J. Simpson trial. Like, he's such a committed person to the thing. And that's something I've always admired about him, is the effort that you can see. His whole thing is like performative effort. He sweats like a mofo at every show he does. It's just like pouring off of him like a waterfall. And I think there's something really beautiful about that, because it's such a tribute to the idea of really caring and really giving a damn and putting all of yourself into something and interrogating those things through like the language of rock music or poetry or even party music, but giving your all to something. And as Jon Stewart said about him one time, emptying the tank every time.
Yeah.
Bruce always empties the tank. He's not like, I don't know, here's another show, whatever, I'm drunk. It's always the most effortful thing he can possibly do at the given moment. So I encourage people to, like, whatever. There is a song you will like. If you're just singing like it's America, like there is a song that you would connect to. And maybe it's a sparse sort of like indie, maybe it's State Trooper, maybe it's Used Cars, maybe it is some of the like the popular, huge Born in the USA stuff like Darlington County, or even Cover Me, or No Surrender, or maybe it's like some of the more Americana stuff, like his cover of Oh Mary Don't You Weep, or his cover of This Little Light of Mine, which is straight fire. I love his cover of This Little Light of Mine, but
it sounds like the did you say the Seeger sessions, like Pete Seeger sessions?
Yeah.
That those to me sound like they could be, because I loved the Johnny Cash albums when he went in with, was it Rick Rubin?
It was Rick Rubin. Yeah.
That series of albums I loved.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like there's probably a way in for me through those.
Yeah, and those two are like super, they recorded them in like 3 days in his barn. It wasn't like, all right, let's do 12 overdubs and 19 session play. It was like, okay, we're all getting together with like 12 mics in the room and just like, and he said on that tour, it was that he felt the difference between performing music and making music, and he was making music on that tour, and that was so fun to see. So yes, for that particular sound, I really encourage people to check it out. I'm like 16 years in, I've still never found the most distinct way to evangelize in this sense without it sounding like such cis straight white guy core, dad rock, lame. I don't know, but there's also, there's a lot of queer readings of Bruce too. There's a lot of Dancing in the Dark is interpreted by many people to be a sort of queer anthem. There's Streets of Philadelphia, which he wrote for the movie Philadelphia, which is of course about a man dying of AIDS. So there's interesting intersections he has too with like other sorts of identities, even though he's like, his live shows, the audience is like depressingly white and male. And he's even talked about that. He's like, I wish it wasn't like that, but that's what it is.
But it does sound like, because I didn't know that he had, I think I probably knew the veteran stuff, like I probably could have come up with that, but I don't think it really does sound, I don't know, like a lot of the politics of Farm Aid, which are, right, like left, labor, union, human rights. And I never would have picked out of the era that he had talked about immigration, or I'm curious if does he ever talk about how he keeps up politically? Like, or is just the songs come out and they hit on some big political social anthems?
Like, does he speak currently to political moments?
Yeah, or has he in his interviews?
Yeah, I mean, like, he stumped and did campaign rallies for Obama for both terms. He did one for Hillary. He did one for Hillary Clinton like the night before the election, which it's like, did you forget? And he's in John Kerry in 2004. He's always pretty outspoken about that. He has a radio show I haven't listened to.
He has a radio show?
Yeah, on Sirius XM Radio, on E Street Radio. He hosts a weekly radio show where it's just like, here's some songs I'm listening to. But in between, he'll talk about current events and be like, what happened at the Capitol was absolutely horrifying and disgusting. And he'll go off and talk about how much he hates Trump and like in his sort of like, I'm an old farmer now way. So he's not outspoken. That's why all the Jeep stuff felt so weird. Cause it's like in 1980, he started a show the night after the election where he's like, I don't know about you, but what happened last night was really scary. 1, 2, 3, 4, super anti-Reagan, super pro, like he's been like this forever. So I think he's definitely developed a lighter touch in recent years, and I don't know why that is. He's not a political songwriter. He said this about himself recently. He's not as much a political songwriter as he is a spiritual songwriter now, and that's true in like his last couple of albums where it's like it touches on politics maybe once or twice, but it's not like he's carrying on Dylan or Guthrie's legacy now. Like his songs are more concerned with faith and his Catholicism, at least in the imagery, than they are with political issues right now.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to see him like morph into that. But then at the same time, like his non-songwriting stuff is like, yeah, Trump sucks. I'm moving to Australia, and like we believe in, he's probably neoliberal. He's probably like, I love Biden, but,
right.
Yeah. But yeah, I think he's become a little less political in recent years.
Sure. That makes sense. What's the site where you said like now you're able to get them just like BruceSpringsteen.com?
BruceSpringsteen.net. He could not get .com. This is true.
He couldn't get .com.
Someone else owned .com like 20 years ago whenever they were first launching their site, and they would not sell it to him. So he's like, all right, .net, okay. So it's BruceSpringsteen.net, which I think is so funny. So yeah, like every
and
show.
And he has still never gotten the .com, or he just doesn't care?
I mean, who cares at this point? But like, it is just so funny. It feels like .net is from 1998. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it just feels like from such a different era. But yeah, all the shows you can buy on there, or nugs.net, which is a site that also sells like the Fish shows and other like prolific bands that have taping culture. Famously too, Bruce has never done drugs. He's like, I've never touched. He's so like, that's what I'm saying. He's such a square in some way. Like he drinks, but he's like, I've never done marijuana, cocaine, like anything like that. He's such a dedicated professional. So he wouldn't like that name either.
Great. Well, Kevin, this has been a blast.
What fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to promote?
People can listen to Good Christian Fun. It's a podcast where we talk about Christian popular culture, from a sort of post-religious lens. We have on Christians, non-Christians, atheists, agnostics, and talk about Christian rock, Christian movies, things like that. And we have a good little time on there. So you can listen to that wherever you find your podcasts.
Nice. I did take class piano 1 with Matthew West.
Whoa.
At Millikan.
Wow. How was he? Was he a nice man?
He was a super nice guy in college.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good,
we sat in the hallway, both of us, before our class piano final, like crying, terrified of our little tiny class piano teacher. Because it was so intimidating. Like, you're just going to go in and do chords for 5 minutes, and that's it. But Matt he was a super nice guy. Although there was a night when a tornado hit campus and power went out. And I think I lived in the women's residence halls. And so we all jump into the basement, and InterVarsity Christian Fellowship was meeting at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came into the basement with us. And then we just have emergency lights. And so he was like then literally playing Kumbaya with the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship during a tornado in a basement.
This anecdote rules. It's so on brand. It rocks.
So on brand.
I love this.
Yeah. So I don't have bad things to say about him other than
good.
When they let us get out of the basement, we ran.
I believe it. And yes, that's going to be what we're like post-quarantine.
Absolutely.
We're going to run out of our basements.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.